I didn't grow up religious. I grew up surrounded by spirits and ancestors' wisdom, protected and taught through silence. But when I went to Catholic school, I met the fear that so many before me were forced to carry. That's where my awakening began. This isn't about rejecting faith. It's about remembering who we were before fear rewrote our stories. Welcome to La Velada Between Worlds. The podcast was originally called Supernatural Sunday, but I ended up changing the name. There was already another show with that title, and I wanted to avoid confusion. But honestly, I glad I actually did because La Velada Between Worlds feels like home. The name connects to my roots, to the veladas I grew up around, those sacred gatherings where the veil between the living and the spirits felt thin. That's what this podcast is really about. The conversations, the lessons, and the moments that happen in that space between worlds. Today, I want to tell you how I became the person behind the screen. How Catholic school, a Bible, and one unexpected teacher triggered a spiritual awakening that led me to question everything they've been taught. This story is personal, it's raw, but I know I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. Welcome to La Velada Between Worlds. I am your guide between worlds. Every Saturday, we dive into the unseen, the unexplainable, and the ancestral whispers that follow us. This isn't ghost hunting, it's remembering. So settle in, open your senses, and let's embrace what lives beyond the veil. I'm your host, Atea Kronos, a cultural historian, fifth generation espiritista, and the founder of Casa Origen. I invite you into the very first episode of my new docu series, the Decolonial Archive, before they call it witchcraft. In this premiere episode, I'm going to share something deeply personal, my own spiritual awakening, the real story behind how I became a cultural historian and why I chose to continue the path of Espiritismo Criollo without religion but with deep spiritual truth. So, wherever you're listening from, settle in and let's talk supernatural. Growing up in a Puerto Rican household, religion wasn't optional. It was embedded in culture and routines and identity. I was raised in a spiritual household that practiced Espiritismo Criollo. But when it came to school, my mom made a choice that would shift everything. After getting into a few fights at public school, I got transferred to a Catholic school. Mind you, my family wasn't really religious. We weren't devoted Catholics or regular churchgoers. That just wasn't us. But it was the middle of the school year and no other school was willing to take me in. The only one that opened its doors was a private Catholic school. It was a sacrifice on my mom, who worked overtime just to pay the tuition. But inside those walls, I began asking questions, not to be rebellious, but because I was curious. Questions about God, the devil, spirit, sin, heaven. But every time I asked, I was met with silence, fear, or guilt. No real answers, just rules. So I turned to the Bible, thinking I did find the truth there. What I found instead were contradictions, violence, and a version of God that didn't feel loving. It felt terrifying. And that confusion pushed me into a dark depression. I felt alone, misunderstood, like something was wrong with me. Catholic school, I met a kid named Arnold. We had a lot in common. During my first week there, I noticed him sitting alone in the cafeteria, quiet, isolated, and lost in his own world. I walked over, introduced myself, and asked why he was sitting by himself. He told me it was hard for him to make friends, that other kids thought he was weird, so he prefers to stay alone. When I asked why they thought that, he hesitated before saying, after I tell you, you might not want to talk to me ever again. Then he confessed that he could see and speak to spirits. Arnold was a medium. The moment he told me, I felt this spark like, wow, finally, someone understood. I told him I was sensitive to the spirit world too, and from that day on, we became friends. But we weren't the same kind of sensitive. Arnold could channel spirits directly. I didn't. My connection came in other ways. I see, hear, and I just know things. That's how my gift speaks to me. We are all born deeply connected to the spirit world. As babies, we can see, hear, and feel the spirits and entities around us. But over time, that connection fades. It fades because of suppression, religious indoctrination, and the way society and culture teach us to fear what we can't explain. I became even more sensitive to the spirit world when my baby brother passed away. I was only 6 years old and I remember everything, every detail. At the funeral, I stood in front of his little casket, shaking his favorite little rattle, wondering why he wouldn't wake up. At that age, I didn't really understand death. But when I shook that rattle, something touched me on my shoulder. I remember looking around and not seeing anyone near me. And that's when I ran straight to my grandmother, who was sitting next to my mother, comforting her. From that day on, my sensitivity only grew stronger and sharper. And with the help of my family, I learned to nurture it instead of fear. Arnold's life at home was heavy. He used to tell me that he felt like his parents hated him. And honestly, I don't blame him for feeling that way. They were deeply religious, the kind that saw everything outside of church as sinful. He wasn't allowed to celebrate Halloween or even dress up for fun. They made him pray several times a day and ask God for forgiveness every time he dared to question their beliefs. One day, he told me his father's planning to send him away. He didn't know where, but he knew it wouldn't be a place where he could actually be himself. Arnold told me that ever since he was a kid, he could deliver messages from spirit. He said his maternal grandmother was the one who helped him understand and strengthen that gift. His grandmother was also a medium. She used to tell him, don't be afraid of it. It's part of who you are. Unfortunately, she was the only one who didn't think he was crazy. After she passed away, he told me he felt really lonely. Even though he still talks to the spirit, he misses her deeply. His story broke my heart. He told me his parents believed he was insane or had some disorder and forced him into therapy, even trying to make him take medication, which he refused because, as he said, there's nothing wrong with me. And I agree with him. Arnold was lonely, misunderstood, and I was his only friend at school. When the school year ended, I unfortunately lost contact with him. Even though I lost contact with Arnold, he's someone I never forgot. He stayed behind my mind for years. Sometimes I wonder how many others went through the same thing. Misdiagnosed, medicated, outcasted, even bullied at school, all because they were different. Before I ended up at the Catholic school, I'd already gone through a few schools, and most of the conflicts I had came from people trying to bully me. There were a lot of reasons. For one, my accent. English is my second language. I was born in Puerto Rico, and some kids could be cruel about the way I spoke or even the way I dressed. I didn't wear name brand clothes or the newest Jordans, which were a big deal back then. My family was humble and we simply couldn't afford those things. So when those girls tried to mess with me, it wasn't because I was connected to the spirit world or they thought I was weird. No, they had other reasons, but I always fought back. If there's one thing you should know about me, is that I am a survivor, honestly. He's one of the main reasons I started this podcast. Him and my own story. Because if we don't talk about these experiences, they just get buried. And people like us keep thinking we were the problem. Everything changed in high school. When I saw a book in my chemistry teacher's bag, Psychology and Religion by Carl Jung. I asked about it. She told me she was agnostic and explained what that meant. For the first time, someone gave me permission to question without fear. She said, "You don't have to stop believing in spirit to let go of religion." That one conversation cracked everything open for me. That book became a gateway to Nazism, esotericism, energy work, and spirit studies. I started learning how our minds, beliefs, and culture shape our entire relationship with the supernatural. From that point on, I walked a lonely path of awakening. Most people I knew were either religious or afraid to question. But me, I had already seen and heard spirits. I had witnessed unexplainable truth in my family's spiritual work. So even though I let go of religion, I never stopped believing in the spirit world. My family never forced religion on me. They practiced Espiritismo Criollo quietly, respectfully, blending African, indigenous, and some Catholic elements, but never rigid. They walk with spirit, not dogma. As I grew older, I realized that many of the Catholic elements were only adopted out of survival because our ancestors had to hide the true practice from colonizers and the church. There came a moment when I realized I had to make a choice. Not just follow Espiritismo Criollo the way my abuela taught me, but to dig deeper, to trace the roots buried beneath the rituals. My family shared everything they knew. The stories, the veladas, the prayers, the healing baths. They told me that Espiritismo Criollo wasn't only about healing the body, and spirit, but also about resistance, a quiet defiance against colonization and oppression. But deep inside, I felt there was still more. I wanted to understand how it all began, the real roots, first whispers, moments that shape what we now call Espiritismo Criollo. I chose to step into the role of cultural historian, tracing the journey of my Boricua heritage and how Espiritismo Criollo came to be, from the Taino ancestors who honor the spirits of the land to the African ancestors who carry their cosmology through unimaginable struggle to the Jibaros who preserve this wisdom in the mountains. I began to piece together the story that colonization tried to silence. My path became clear: to return to Espiritismo Criollo in its raw, decolonized form, to reconnect with our original wisdom, to speak the names and truth that were hidden, and to honor the voices of those who carry this tradition through generations of resistance. This is more than history. It is identity and survival. And now it is also our future. Today, I walk this path as a spiritista, curandera, historian, and a mother. I practice Espiritismo Criollo without Catholic elements, honoring the indigenous and African roots my ancestors were once forced to hide. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm here to remind you that you can reclaim your own path. You don't have to call yourself religious to be spiritual. You don't have to fit into a box to connect with the divine. And you are not broken just because you have questions. There's power in not knowing. There is strength in walking into the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Velada Between Worlds. If my story resonated with you, share this with someone who's awakening too, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. Next Saturday, we go even deeper into the supernatural, the spiritual, and the stories that were never meant to survive. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever been made to feel crazy for questioning religion or feeling connected to the spirit world? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. Now, until then, stay curious, stay open minded, stay grounded in truth, and remember, I'm not your guru, just your reminder. I see you next week. Remember to subscribe to continue this journey with me. And pa'lante siempre, luz y progreso. Mwah. Before you go, I want to share something with you. Did you know that in the 1600s, across the misty hills of Europe, there walked people known only as sin eaters? When someone died, the family would place bread and ale on the chest of the body. The sin eaters would arrive in silence, eat the food, drink the ale, and with every bite, it was said they consumed the dead person's sins. The soul could ascend clean, free from earthly burdens. But there was a price. The sin eaters were fear. People believed the darkness of every spirit they cleansed clung to them, that shadows followed them home, whispering through the night. Because when you live off the sins of the dead, you stop belonging to the living.